Hello everyone. So Amber Heard has just reached a settlement agreement with Johnny Depp in which she only has to pay 1 million instead of 8.3 million, which could have been a different amount after appeal, could have been higher or lower depending on how the judges went, and there was a chance of a retrial. Not a very big chance, but I said before in my analysis of the appeals that the best chance for her to win an appeal would be to have a retrial on the basis of medical records. Now again, I didn't think that was very likely. I put it at 0.02%. In other words, there was a 99.98% chance that it wouldn't happen. And that's because even though the medical records should have been included, that was a mistake to leave them out, they don't really make a significant difference. And also arguably they sort of were included in an indirect way. So you kind of have that, and then but I still think there was a chance that that would happen. And if that were to happen, of course, then you'd have the whole trial again, and you can kind of imagine how that trial might work. I think if they were going to go with a retrial, they would also have included, well, firstly the mention that this trial had happened and that Johnny Depp was announced as the winner, because there was a result in this trial. And I think that they'd also announced that there was the UK trial and that Amber Heard, well, the Sun newspaper had won that. And so you'd have a lot of arguments would focus around that. Around, yes, Johnny Depp won this one, but Amber Heard effectively won the other one. So you'd be having that, and you'd be trying to consolidate them. That's what a retrial would probably look like. You'd have the medical records in there, and everything. I'd essentially expect that if a retrial happened, everything that was excluded would be included. And it would be focused on a lot of different things. I don't think that they care about it being held in California, but that'd probably be mentioned. And you'd have all this other stuff about the donations and all this sort of stuff. And look, I think they'd probably also mention the bits about the divorce, which weren't mentioned. And the fact that she was actually not allowed to talk because of the divorce settlement that she agreed to. And even that bit from the lawyer saying, hey, you either pay me this amount of money and do these different things permanently, long term, or else I'll get that restraining order or protection order out. And I think you'd have all that. And I think in the end what you'd have is when you'd be looking at damages, you'd say, well, we're giving 50 million. Say, why are you giving only 50 million? And say, well, because I actually lost 210 million. But because I lost the UK trial, I've been limited to only apply for the 4 years, not those first 2 years. And even though those 4 years would be 150 million, I have to lower that because I'd already been damaged because of the reports in the Sun. So I had to exclude that damage to my regular income that was the result of the Sun. So I'm only putting the damage from this, and this is why I've got 50 million. And I think if that was the scenario that they were presenting, I actually think that'd be in Johnny Depp's favour as far as damages. Like, if he's going to win, that would increase the amount. And I'd expect that a jury would be much more likely to give him the full 50 million. So that whole retrial thing that Amber Heard's looking at might not actually work in her favour. It might end up with a bigger amount against her. And also think that they would put more attention on the counterclaim. I actually think the counterclaim would be dismissed, but they would hear it in full, and you'd also have the context, and I think that they would hear the full amount of the statements in context, and then you'd say, okay, look, this is clearly just presenting the case, and there's nothing defamatory in that. So I think that's what a retrial would look like if it was ordered. I think they'd have to go for everything, so they'd include the bits from both sides. Not that Johnny Depp's asking for a retrial, but if there is one, he would be asking for all that. And I think the end result of that would be that suddenly Johnny Depp would win by 50 million. And you wouldn't have any, the counterclaim I think would be completely dismissed. You'd also probably then have a lot of pressure on the UK trial, and I would expect that Johnny Depp's team would use it as effectively an appeal against the UK trial. and trying to show that that was an unfair decision and that it was based on limited information with Amber Heard lying, and she would then face perjury charges. So when you're having all that, and that's what would happen if she wins, I think that it'd be very, very dangerous for her to win. And the reality is she could also, even with, if she loses, it's not just a matter of her losing that 2 million, going up to 10.3 with nothing further against her, or nothing in her favour, but it could all go all the way to 15 million because that's what the jury asked for. Or it could go to 13 million because the jury actually asked for 15 for him and 2 million for her. So if they go to what the jury actually asked for and ignore that little technicality, and I'm sure that the Court of Appeal is allowed to do that, they could easily go to 13 million, make it 13 million, and but most likely I think they would have dismissed the claim against Adam Waldman because there was some fundamental errors of law there. And yeah, Amber Heard was not likely to win the appeal. So that, and I say not likely, I'm saying really, really no chance. No practical chance of her winning. And I think if you look at the way that different people were commenting on it, there was no practical chance of her winning. So in this way, why would Johnny Depp accept this? And the simple answer is he doesn't care about the money. Well, and I say that, he does, but 10 million is not enough to alleviate the problems that he had. He lost 210 million in it, not 10, not even 50. He lost 210. He was prevented from asking for the full 210 because of the previous judgment. So even a $50 million amount wouldn't really make a big difference to him. He knows that she can't afford it. He knows that he won't pay it. He knows that she won't pay it. So him getting 1 million from her is probably as much as he could have got. And he didn't want to ruin her life. So in this way, she's able to continue her life. He's happy with that, because if she's able to continue her life, then she won't keep doing stuff against him. Now, she can make it look like a victory in the eyes of her supporters, which are all the newspapers, media outlets that have continued to support her no matter what. So it's good in that sense too. So she's able to spin this as a victory. He will spin this as a victory too. And he will explain this. He hasn't done it yet, but he will, I'm sure. And you can obviously see why Amber Heard would agree with this, because that appeal was not going to look good for her. She'd be hoping that he wins, and in fact she might even instruct her lawyers to not really fight for that retrial, because that retrial was going to be pretty bad. And look, they did ask for amendments in the amount of damages and for the judge to simply award in her favour, or the judges, but that was never going to happen. So, that's the thing, that once she saw that there was a zero chance of that, and the only possibility was that medical information bit being excluded, I think that she said, well, that's a retrial, and the retrial would probably look worse for me afterwards. So she accepted this. So is there any way to spin this as a victory for her? Yes, and she already has. But is it really a win for her? I think in some ways it is. And certainly if he'd been really mean about it, he could have appealed the amount and said, well, 15 million. And he hasn't done that. I think because it's about reputation for him, and it's about money for her. She doesn't care about the reputation side. Being branded a liar, that's not really a big deal for her. She doesn't like it, but it's not a big deal. And so I think there was a compromise that has been reached, and that's what's happened. She doesn't have to pay the money, he doesn't have to worry about the reputation. All happy. Not very happy, but a little bit happy. But I suspect this is not the end, because I think Amber Heard's probably going to make a book, and we'll see what happens after that. Anyway, that's it from me. Bye bye now.